Hey y'all, it's Ashley Bookish and I'm back with another video. So today is day number 11 of Vlogmas. We are like kind of almost to the halfway point type of situation. Only a couple of days from the halfway point, and I can't believe I have made it this far without skipping a day. This is crazy. This is great. This is great. It's not crazy. It's great. It's a great thing that we've made it this far. So what I wanted to do in this video, as you can see by the title, is talk about the worst books that I've ever read. So I'm going to give a disclaimer. This is not going to include the worst books that I've read in 2020 because I want to save that for a later video. This is just the worst books that I have read from about 2014 to 2019, and there are some bad ones. There are some really bad ones on this list. So as always, before we get into the books, let's talk a little bit about the song that I've chosen. This one is a little different. I went with a Mary J. Blige song, which is No Happy Holidays. Now, the catch about this is that technically this was not released as a holiday song on a holiday album, but whenever you look up songs that are typically played that are Black holiday songs, this one comes up on the list. So I was like, let me investigate it. And essentially I thought that this would fit for worst books because the title is No Happy Holidays. So when I thought Holly Jolly Christmas, I was like, ooh, books that make me happy. And then when I thought No Happy Holidays, I was like, okay, so these are books that didn't make me happy. These are books that I just did not like at all. So let's jump into a little bit about the song. There really is not a lot because it is part of an album itself, but I'll talk about that now. So like I said, the song that we're focusing on today is No Happy Holidays, written by Mary J. Blige. This came out in 1999 and it was included on the album Mary, which is technically her fourth studio album. Now this song is essentially about a woman who is realizing that her relationship is no good and that her and her special person literally spend no holidays together. So Christmas is included in this song where she says we don't spend Christmas together, but then there's also other holidays that are included as well. But I was like, okay, well she does talk about Christmas, so technically I'm gonna use this, and it focuses on how unhappy she is with their relationship. So this is definitely a good point to think about books that I am unhappy with. All right, y'all, so let's go ahead and jump into the books. Some of these books are booktube darlings. I'm sorry, they just weren't for me. I'm going to put a disclaimer that just because I didn't like the book doesn't mean that you won't like the book. So if you still want to give it a try, give it a try. These books just were not for me and I didn't enjoy them when I picked them up. So the first book that I have on this list is actually a holiday book, and it is Pride and Prejudice and Mistletoe by Melissa De La Cruz. Most people actually don't even like this book. It has a low rating on Goodreads, like a 2.6 rating on Goodreads, and it is a gender-swapped holiday version of Pride and Prejudice. However, I had so many problems with this book. Namely in the fact that I don't feel like this book went through enough copy edits. There were so many different grammatical errors, so many different things structurally that were absolutely just wrong with this book. I thought that it was a lot of dialogue about dropping money and bragging about how wealthy the characters were. The romance wasn't even really there. Like, I didn't understand how Darcy and Luke fell in love because Darcy is actually a woman and Luke Bennett is a man, and the two of them fall in love over the course of a couple days. It just wasn't realistic, and to be so short and to think that it was supposed to capture the beauty and essence of Pride and Prejudice, it failed completely. I actually did a full review on this, but I'm nervous to link it because it was like 3 years ago. It was at a different point in my life. I was horrible at reviewing, but I just didn't like this book, y'all. I was so disappointed and so heartbroken that Melissa De La Cruz took Pride and Prejudice and gender swapped it and gave us this trash dumpster fire of a book. The next one that I have on this list is one that I read when I was going through my phase of kind of exploring a little bit more of Kindle Unlimited and trying to figure out what I liked, what I didn't like, and I wanted to see what Kindle Unlimited fantasy was like, particularly YA fantasy, and I ended up picking up Blood and Snow by Rochelle Workman. So this was supposed to be a reimagining of Snow White mixed in with some vampires. Y'all, it was just wasn't good. It wasn't good. It wasn't good. It was just so many things going on and so many different storylines that the story was completely all over the place, that it was just so stereotypical in terms of how the teenagers in this book were written. And I was like, I thought that maybe we would be past this point of writing teens and how we imagine them and not really how they are in real life if we're adults writing YA. And this clearly wasn't a conversation that happened with the development of this book. And I really felt like there was a little bit of cultural appropriation that happened in this book as well. There were elements of Japanese culture that were included, but they felt like they were thrown in for the sake of throwing them in, because there was no true explanation as to why the Japanese elements, cultural elements of the book were added. It just didn't flow. It didn't make sense. I felt like the main character, who was supposed to be Snow White, was just all over the place, and there was this dark looming vampire queen that wanted to kill her, and it was just too much. It was all over the place. This book is part of a series that I think covers a couple of different kind of fairy tale reimaginings, and I just wasn't feeling it. I just didn't like it at all. This next one is probably going to be a little controversial because this one is actually an award-winning book, and it is This One Summer by Mariko Tamaki. And the artwork in this graphic novel was unbelievable. It was so beautiful. I love the purple hue that was maintained throughout the entire book. I thought that the characters were developed artistically in such a beautiful way. I was visually enthralled with this book. However, the storyline just did not work. So it's about these two girls who are actually going to a lake house for the summer, and there are some pretty traumatic things that happen during the course of this book. And what was supposed to be an experience where the two young girls are learning about empathy and learning just life lessons, it just doesn't happen. There was a little bit of slut shaming that went on from the perspective of a child that I didn't really like. And granted, it would have been a learning opportunity because culturally, I get where that was coming from. I get what the intention was, because that's a learned behavior, but nothing ever comes from it. The two girls don't learn anything. There is no resolution. So it kind of left me feeling like, what was the purpose of this again? To show us that children pick up on learned behaviors and go through or watch family members or other people go through traumatic experiences and then learn nothing from it. It was just not the book for me, and I don't know if maybe I didn't take from it what I was supposed to take from it, and I felt that way because it is an award-winning graphic novel and it was specifically written for a teen audience, so I tried to keep that in mind when reading it, but I still just didn't like it. I just felt like there was no justification for anything. Like it just didn't go where I thought it was going to go. So this is one definitely where I feel like I'm probably on the opposite end of the trend of enjoying this graphic novel. Most people do enjoy it. It's award-winning. People really love it at the library. It wasn't for me. The next one I have is Lockwood Lions, Always Upbeat by Stephanie Perry Moore. And this is one that I read. This is classified as teen urban fiction, which is something probably that I want to explore a little bit next year on my channel and talk a little bit more about that. I'm not going to talk about it in this video. It is a categorization of what I typically consider realistic fiction. So I read this because a lot of the kids that I work with do like reading teen urban fiction, and I thought that this would be a fun one to try out. It had your typical drama stuff. Cheerleader and football player are together, and then he ends up having a I don't want to say, I mean, affair is a strong word for this situation, but he ends up cheating on her essentially, and I was enjoying it, and I was interested in seeing how more was going to develop our main characters in light of the situation that was happening, considering that they were both in high school. But when it came down to have the conversation about the cheating, I felt like more wrote the narrative in a way that made our female lead or our heroine take responsibility for the fact that her boyfriend cheated on her because she wasn't paying him enough attention. And I have a serious problem with that just in general, but pushing that message out to teenagers, regardless of gender identity at all, is a problem to me. I don't think you should ever tell someone that they got cheated on because they weren't attentive enough. When someone cheats, it's because they make the decision to cheat. They don't have to cheat. There are ways to handle things. There are ways to have conversations about that. And for me, it was very troublesome reading that narrative because I'm thinking books influence. And I don't want people reading this thinking that it's okay to take responsibility for someone else's actions, especially something like cheating. And she made our heroine take responsibility for what he did. And it was just, I just didn't like that. It was probably going to be like a 3.5 star read. And then as soon as I got to that point, I was like, yeah, this is, I can't do this. I can't do this. So the next one that I have on here is The Secrets We Keep by Trisha Lever. And I read this one because it was nominated for a book award in my state. And it is about twins who go through an accident and one twin dies. It's not a spoiler. The twin that survives assumes the identity of her dead sister. And it was just, it was, first of all, it's a depressing book because the twin that has survived is like so self-deprecating to the point that it was very hard to make it through the book, because she felt like because she was the less popular teen that it was okay that everyone thought that she died instead of her sister. And I feel like there were so many things that happened in this book as a consequence of that singular lie that didn't need to happen. And then it never examined the psychology of why she would even need to lie that badly because of her perspective of her own self-worth. That was just never explored. So it just felt like that one little lie for me just was like, oh my gosh, if we just, you know, just went with things the way that they were and we, you know, had some serious conversations, this book wouldn't even have needed to be written. And there was just no conversations about the extent of trauma and grief that she was feeling that she needed to lie like that. It was just, oh my gosh, it just wasn't. I was so surprised. It's supposed to be, I guess, like a mystery thriller, and I didn't enjoy it at all. Next on this list we have The Swap by Megan Scholl. And The Swap is a very interesting book. It is actually it's been made into a movie, which I find very, very fascinating. It is about a middle school boy, a middle school girl who switch bodies, which is done well in that sense because there's so many different ways that could have gone, especially when you start looking at age categorization and maturity level and being able to handle that content. It did that very well. However, I don't know what goes on sometimes when adults write characters that are either in middle school or high school and there's no research done about culturally within those age groups how they communicate with each other, because the language that was used in this book just wasn't realistic in terms of how middle schoolers would have communicated with each other in the time that this book came out. It just wasn't. It was overdone. It was just exaggerated. And then there was also uses of language that very much like bothered me in terms of like gendering language, calling boys saw. I just didn't like that. And it was challenged, but it was challenged so late that it was rushed and it wasn't effective the way I think the author wanted it to be effective. So I was surprised that this actually won an award in my state, and I was like, this is not it. This is not it. This is not how we should be thinking that middle schoolers actually communicate with each other, and B, this is not the language that we should be teaching them is appropriate to communicate with each other at all. So I don't know. I have never seen the movie. I don't plan to see the movie. I'm not interested in seeing the movie. It just, oh gosh, it just makes my skin crawl thinking about the use of language that was included in this book, especially when we talk about gender identity. I just didn't like it. Next on this list, I have Wink, Poppy at Midnight by April Genevieve Tehoke. I believe that's how you say her last name. So, Wink, Poppy Midnight made its debut on BookTube probably in about 2016, 2017, somewhere around that era. And it was definitely a book that was disguised under this flowery language and this mystery element. And you thought that all these characters, because it's 3 characters that we're focused on, we're going to go through this big event, this big adventure, and nothing happens. Like literally. This book is nothing. There's nothing. It was just there. You literally read it and you're like, why did I read this? What purpose did this serve? Nothing happens. There literally is no plot whatsoever. So if you enjoy books like that, this may be a hit for you, but it was a miss, a huge miss for me. And I think that this is definitely intended for an audience that does not know that you can't judge people by their covers, or you can't judge a book by its cover, but you can't judge people at face value is the intention of this, I think. And that people's personalities extend further than the surface, which at the point in which I read this book, I was like, I know that, so I may not have been the intended audience, but I mean, no plot, y'all. Beautiful language, but no plot. And I went into this super blind, which is why I'm being so vague, just in case anybody does want to pick it up. And I did not really realize what was going on until about 60% into the book, because I went in blind. And even if you read the description on Goodreads or anywhere else, like, the description is not going to tell you anything either. So it is one of those books you kind of have to just jump in and see how it feels. But I know that this one just was not. This one wasn't written for me to enjoy. Next, I have a BookTube darling, and that is Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell. I did not like this graphic novel. To this day, I do not know why. This graphic novel won Best Graphic Novel for Goodreads Choice Awards. It was so predictable. It was so easy to figure out where this book was headed within like 40 pages of reading it. And it was so disappointing to realize that I was able to figure it out so quickly. And you have to be very mindful of that whenever you're creating a graphic novel, because you have less space to develop your characters. You have less space to really get your plot moving. And I just feel like overall it was very poorly executed. And while it was supposed to be cute and cozy and fun, it really wasn't for me. Now, what I did enjoy about this was the artwork by Faith Erin Hicks. It was done beautifully. Rich colors, beautiful characterizations, just a beautiful setup. I think that when the writing aspect came in on Rainbow Rowell's part, it just wasn't good, and it just wasn't well thought out, in my opinion. And that's coming from a place of reading quite a few graphic novels and comics and stuff. It just wasn't adequately executed to the point that I think they were intending, and it just made it a easy to figure out graphic novel, which just took away from the reading experience. And I definitely do not feel like this book deserved to be the Goodreads Choice Award of whatever year it was. It was definitely a popularity contest, because this went up against some killer comics and graphic novels, and it definitely did not top those in terms of writing. Artwork, Faith Erin Hicks can hold their own when it comes to art, but not story-wise. Next, I have Hater by Cambria Hubert, and this is the second book in the hashtag series. So I read the first book and actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I got to the second one, I was like, what happened? So the issues with this one was that, and I don't want to talk a little too much about what it's about because it is the second book in the series, but I can tell you I didn't like it. I thought that the characters from the first book were okay in the second book and writing them again, but the villain from the first book, essentially it's about a nerd that falls in love with the jock, that type of romance. I feel like he was just overly characterized as villain to the point that it just didn't make sense for him to be so destructive. He went from doing stupid things to doing things that were so harmful that it was out of character for him as a villain, which I've never had experience with. And I was like, this is really awkward. And I felt like she was trying to play up the drama so much with him that it just my voice, it didn't come across as well as she thought it was going to come across. Also, if you're gonna write a sports romance, do your research, okay? Like, you can't write a romance about football and then you don't know what you're talking about. So there were two things in this book that didn't make sense to me. There was a part where she stated that the character was signed into the NFL. You don't sign to be a part of the NFL. You get drafted to be signed to a team. And there was no mention of the draft. It was like, yeah, the NFL called me and I signed a contract. That's not the way that it works. Like, you go through a draft process, okay? So I don't know what that was about. And then there was a scene in which she said, during a football game, in which she said that the running back tackled the quarterback, which, not sure how that happens, considering that the running back and the quarterback are both offensive positions. So how do you have two opposing teams have offensive players on the field at the same time? Doesn't make any sense. There's no way that a running back and a quarterback would have been on the same field at the same time on opposing teams, because then that means that both teams would have had their offensive teams on the field. It was just like, come on. If you're gonna write a sports romance, know the sport that you're writing about. Or if you're gonna include parts of that, like, get someone to fact check that knows the sport, because clearly you don't know the sport. So, and what would I be talking about the worst books if I didn't include Miss Junie B. Jones? Some of you are gonna be like, Ashley, don't do that. Y'all, I don't like Junie B. Jones, okay? I just don't like her. However, I have gotten comments on my unpopular opinions tag video where people told me that I need to continue because she evolves. So I may do a project with that next year. I haven't really decided yet, but for now I'm not a fan of Junie B. Jones. I read the first 4 books in the series and it was a quick read, but Junie B. Jones is so mean. She's so mean, and I get that kids go through phases of being very self-absorbed. It's part of their development. I have a child. I get it. But she was just straight hostile. Like, she held back nothing for no one. And I was like, is she supposed to be a likable character? Like, am I supposed to enjoy her as a character? Because she's not likable. She was just very mean to everyone. And the parts where she was not really understanding like directions that her parents were giving her about different scenarios that she went through in the first 4 books, I got that because she was just at an age where she wouldn't get it. But the hostility that she showed to other students in school about her being smarter and prettier, I was like, what the world? This is a freaking child. Like, I don't know, it was crazy, but I think that people told me that the development does happen over the course of the series, so maybe I need to kind of pull back a little bit and do some inner soul searching and think about maybe kind of working my way through the series and making a project of it and seeing if my thoughts change or if I'm kind of the same. I have to really debate whether I'm going to torture myself to do such a thing, but we shall see if that ends up happening. Alright y'all, so those are 10 of the worst books that I have ever read. I'm sure there are more that I'm forgetting. I know that there are more that I'm forgetting because I haven't even touched the worst books that I read in 2020, which will be a completely different video. In the comments below, let me know what are some of the worst books that you have ever read. Are you ever fearful about sharing your worst books because you think that, dang, like I feel like people love this but I didn't like it? I will always love hearing those types of conversations. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button. If you're looking for ways to support my channel, all the links will be down in the description box. If you're looking for ways to follow me on social media, all of those links will be down in the description box as well. And I'll be back with a video tomorrow. We're doing this, y'all. We're doing it.